So this is Belmont from Paper Wars, issue 87. This is from fall of 2017. This is, as it says, Grant's baptism of command, November 7th, 1861. This is one of his earlier battles, very early in the war. And you can see here a very colorful map. It looks like November with the leaves changed color. This is, of course, you can tell by the unique look of it, but it is a Rick Barber map of the Belmont area. And Belmont is sort of a misnomer, and if you think it's a city, or a town even, it's not. It's literally just 3 buildings, or 4 buildings in this case. So it's almost just somebody's own farm. But this was Ulysses S. Grant, his advancement of several regiments on the Confederate Camp Johnston, there along the Missouri shoreline of the Mississippi River. Over there on the other side, you've got Columbus, Kentucky, a little bit of Kentucky over there, and there's a lot of glare here, just the way my table's set up. I've got the lights are over there, which is on the, usually you want the lights either behind you or far enough away that they're not going to reflect off the top of the plexi. But anyway, through the first turn of the game, and this is a company level Civil War game, which makes it pretty unique in my opinion. I struggle to name any other company Civil War games. I've never played any, so I don't know if there are any others. If there are, feel free to chime in and let me know. Maybe one of the old S&T games or something might be a company level Civil War treatment, but this is certainly the only one I've played before. This is a John Paniski design. He designed Hearts and Minds, which is a Vietnam card-driven game. He designed Lincoln's War, the kind of flawed Civil War CDG that was kickstarted by MMP a number of years ago, and was never really, I don't know if it wasn't developed enough, but the rules had some problems back when that game came out, and the Kickstarter was kind of delayed, and so I think MMP kickstarted it before it was really ready to go. I played it. It was okay, but again, suffered from some of the rules issues that I think have since been corrected. I haven't returned to the game, though, to see if it's improved any. But anyway, back to Belmont. The way this starts is you've got the Union coming over here from Hunter's Farm. They've landed at the dock here. They're required to keep, I think, 5 companies and the company commander of the 27th Illinois in reserve to guard the farm. The rest of the 27th Illinois, you can see, is free to advance on with the rest of the Union troops. I've got the cavalry deployed down here, sort of facing off against each other on the far right and left of the Union and Confederate lines, respectively. These kind of dots here on the map, or this was the starting point, so the Union troops have to start on this side of the starting line. Up here in the middle, you can see there's Grant, and I think he's with McClernand. That's Taylor, the artillery commander. I've got the Union field artillery started there so that they can take some shots at the Confederate position there at the start, where you can see the Confederates are guarding the road to the camp. The main objective for the Union troops is to seize that camp. They get some victory points depending on how fast they do it. The faster they do it, the more points they get. I think if they do it before turn 5, they get 10 victory points. As you can see, the way I have the Confederates deployed here, they're deployed across the easiest terrain for the Union troops to get to the camp. I've got a flanking force here of the 31st Illinois that I'm going to try and send around through the woods to get to the camp. I'm not sure how to respond to that with the Confederates at this point, because of Polk's lackluster command readiness for this battle. The Confederates start out badly outnumbered, with just 2 regiments facing off against, I don't know, whatever it is, 6 or 7 U.S. regiments. And that's a problem for them in terms of keeping the Union from getting to the camp. So I tried to place their artillery along the 2 main roads leading up to the camp, and then deployed the 12th Tennessee as sort of a screen on the left flank and this other road here, so that the Union couldn't simply sweep around and use all the roads. So they're going to have to slog through at 2 movement points apiece to get through the woods there, since the company's infantry only has 6 movement points. It's going to take them a long time to get through all those woods hexes. But as you can see here, in the middle, I've got a couple of Union companies broke through the Confederate line there, killed a couple of Confederate companies, and yes, I've got lights over my shoulder as well. It's casting a shadow. Again, this isn't the greatest space in my basement to be playing, but it was free table space that I had, so we make do with what we have. But the Union troops busted through the Confederate line there, and set this down so I can point a little bit at what I'm showing. There were two Confederate companies here that were eliminated through melee. The Union charged up the slope here. Fighting up a slope cost you an extra strength point, but they had the leader there that kind of offset that, or helped offset that. The Confederates get reduced to 1 broken company. I had them retreat. The Union had rolled for unbridled fury, which is basically a kind of almost like a cavalry pursuit, but with infantry. It means the troops are, these guys are all green, so they're out of control, and they go running after the retreating units. They manage to eliminate the remaining retreating unit in the melee. The problem is they're kind of way out of position now from the rest of their supporting units, and they're going to get shot in the face by Confederate artillery, and probably from Confederate musketry fire here. So these guys are probably not long for this world. They already have a broken company there, which they were unable to rally because they were in a zoc of an enemy. So that may be bad for this regiment because their leader's kind of stuck out here. He could end up getting eliminated. So depending on how the chip pool goes, and it is a chip pool game, it's kind of a handy little thing here. I like this as far as the record keeping stuff goes here. I like that there's a space to lay out your chits as you draw them, because the order is important. There's this confused orders token here for the Confederates, means that the next drawn Confederate counter will be subject to the confused orders rules, which are basically you do a die roll and see if they do what you want them to do or if they do something totally random. So usually moving in a oddball direction or just staying put. So it's kind of nice feature on the map to be able to track your chits as you draw them. But if I can get lucky with the chit draw and get a movement for the 30th Illinois before this artillery, before I draw the Confederate HQ chit, I might have a chance to be able to save the 30th Illinois leader there. So that's where it is after 1 turn. The Union has burst forth from their positions. I essentially had them all just lined up along the start line, ready to go. These guys are going to try and do a big overrun of the 12th Tennessee, while the 31st Illinois attempts to slog around through the woods, and the cavalry face off against each other on the flank over there. So we will see where the turns go after this. The Confederates eventually will be able to start moving in. You can see they have a lot of regiments in reserve over there. The Columbus reserve box. Columbus is the building over here. After a certain number of turns, or after the Union captures Camp Johnston, Polk sort of wakes up from his stupor and starts sending his reserve units across the river on transports. The Union has a couple of gunboats that they can use to try and sink the transports. Those gunboats are going to be shot at by these fixed batteries here for the Confederates. In these trenches over here, the gunboats can either try and shoot at the transports that are crossing between Columbus and Camp Johnston, or they can try and take out these batteries over here, because at a certain point these batteries will be able to start launching. If the Union takes Camp Johnston, those batteries will be able to start launching at the Union troops in Camp Johnston. So if they can try and take them out with the Union gunboats, that's good, but that may not be feasible. The gunboats don't have a lot of strength to bring against those batteries, and they're pretty outgunned by the batteries over there, and they can end up getting sunk after they take 5 or 6. They get six hits will sink them, which would be a victory point penalty for the Union. So you kind of want to protect your gunboats, but on the other hand, if you can harass the Confederate transports, because the Confederates only have a limited number of transports that will start to increase as the game goes on. If they don't have very many transports to bring these companies across, then that obviously makes it very difficult for the Confederates to muster any sort of counterattack, even with those numbers. If they're just trickling across, it's going to be hard for them to hit the Union back. The way morale works in the game is the Union starts out with high morale until they get to the camp, and then morale essentially reverses. Like the Confederates wake up and realize, hey, we need to counterattack here. The Union troops are busy looting the camp. Grant has sort of lost control of his forces, and so that signifies that morale shift signifies Grant losing control of his green troops, and the Confederates trying to mount a counterattack. So that sort of evens, in terms of game balance, kind of evens the game out a little bit. It also changes in these initial phases. The Confederates have a confused orders token, but later, once the Union takes the camp, then the chits are switched. The Confederate one comes out of the cup and the Union one goes in, and so now the Union gets to suffer from the command and control disorder that happens after they're kind of running wild through the camp. And historically, that's what happened. The Union troops started looting the camp, even though they had driven the Confederates out and seized it. The Confederates mounted a counterattack back across the river and sent the Union scrambling back to Hunter's farm and the docks there, where they all jumped on their own boats and sailed away. So it ended up being kind of a draw, just because the Confederates took some really unnecessary casualties because of their slow response to the Union attack. But the Union ended up taking more casualties overall, just because their sort of pell-mell disorganized retreat back from the camp led to more casualties on their side. So it was sort of a strategic victory for Grant, but a tactical loss, just because he didn't maintain control of the field at the end of the battle. So there we are at the end of turn 1. I'll probably check back in after a couple more turns and see where things are at, if the Unions managed to take the camp as they did historically, or if the gunboats have been able to do anything, or if the Confederates are able to mount enough of a defense to stymie the Union.